I often feel like a silent observer, moving through these rain-slicked streets of the soul, just watching people trapped in what this perspective calls their gilded cages. What we're about to explore is a really radical way of looking at time. It's stark, for sure, but there's also something strangely beautiful about it. So let's dive in.
This is how most of us see it, isn't it? It's the common illusion. We think of time as a kind of currency that we need to hoard, a resource to spend wisely. Life is this sunlit playground of endless possibility where we are the masters of our own hours. But what if that whole playground is built on a foundation of sand?
And right here, this is the terrible honesty at the very heart of this explainer. What if time isn't a gift to be spent at all, but a heavy, unavoidable sentence that we have to serve? Now, this isn't about being pessimistic. It's about a profound shift in perspective, away from a logic of control and towards a logic of acceptance. So the real question becomes, how could accepting something so bleak possibly change anything for the better?
Well, that's what this first section is all about. This perspective argues that the way we normally think about time, it actually traps us. It builds this beautiful but ultimately confining cage. A cage made out of our own anxieties about what's to come and our regrets about what's already past.
We're constantly trying to possess, master, or outrun the inevitable, right? We try to control every moment, manage our schedules down to the second, and even try to outrun the person we used to be. But this whole idea suggests that it's a completely futile effort. It's a struggle that ironically stops us from making any real spiritual progress.
To really get a feel for this idea of futility, the source material gives us this incredibly powerful allegory. It's a story of a young man, and he basically personifies this entire struggle against the inevitable.
Okay, so picture this scene. He's in a temple, but it has no doors. This is such a brilliant way to illustrate the nature of his prison. It's his own existence. There's no escape hatch, no way out of the relentless forward march of time.
And it gets heavier. The temple faces only west. The symbolism here is just so potent. The west, of course, represents the sunset, the inevitable end of the day, the twilight of a life. He's literally forced to stare down his own conclusion all the time.
And inside, he's just obsessed with the clocks. He's desperate to bargain with them, pleading for just one more moment of delay. He's living under this complete delusion that time is something he can negotiate with, that he can somehow master the very countdown that is consuming him.
So this is the turning point in the story, the moment that illusion just shatters. And it's called a terrible honesty for a reason, because this kind of truth so often arrives before we're actually ready to surrender to it.
So let's really put these two worldviews side by side. The precious gift idea is all rooted in control, in chasing after possibilities. But the heavy sentence model? Well, that's about accepting the countdown. It's this massive shift from anxiously trying to use time to courageously learning how to serve it.
And let's be clear, this acceptance isn't some kind of passive defeat. No way. The source actually frames it as a Nietzschean will to endure. It's a deep spiritual strength. It's the kind of fortitude that comes from looking at the hardest truths of existence right in the eye and not flinching. It's about taking the weight of that sentence and turning it into a foundation of strength.
And once that acceptance really starts to take root, something absolutely remarkable begins to happen. Your whole experience of life itself starts to transform, and you start to see a completely new kind of beauty.
Man, I find this quote just incredibly powerful. Think about it. It suggests that our suffering, our deepest wounds, they aren't flaws that we need to fix or heal in the usual sense. Instead, they're part of the rhythm of our own personal countdown, the steady, constant beat of our finite story.
So, how in the world do you actually cultivate this kind of fortitude? Well, the path, as you see here, really begins when you let go of that need to own the hours. Then you learn to just witness your stories unraveling, not as a tragedy, but just as a process. And that allows you to transform the sentence into strength, and finally to experience life not as something to be possessed, but simply to be lived.
This whole journey leads to a final state of liberation. And what's amazing is that it's not just you who gets freed, it's time itself.
The ultimate shift here is an aesthetic one. The focus is no longer on what could have been, but just on the story as it was. The beauty isn't found in all the possibilities, but, as the source puts it, in how long it took for the story to reach its end. Your very existence becomes a work of art, a masterpiece that's defined by its own finite duration.
And this brings us to the resolution, the final exhale.
By serving the sentence, by enduring the countdown with grace, that desperate need to control time just dissolves. And in that state of surrender, time is finally liberated from our constant frantic attempts to contain it.
So, we're going to end with a question that turns this whole idea right back to you. And I know it's a challenging thought, but it's also a really profound one. If you were to truly accept time not as a gift to be spent, but as a heavy sentence, what would change for you? Where would you find the fortitude, the spiritual grace to not just serve it, but to find the deep beauty in its steady, rhythmic unraveling?